Well, we're in Daniel chapter 7. And Daniel chapter 7 is one of those chapters that when you say we're going to study the book of Daniel, this is one of those chapters that makes some people squeal with delight and some people run screaming into the night saying, "No more Daniel!" But it needn't be frightening. If you break it down and use good, solid Bible study principles on it, it's certainly nothing that can't be understood. I don't think God would give us any part of His Word that can't be understood. I used to, when I was a kid, I got something on my shoe, and that's what. Now, when I was a kid, I heard people put this idea forward that, well, some parts of the Bible just aren't meant to be understood. Well, as I got older, I thought about that. I don't agree with that. I don't think that God would give us a part of His Word that He doesn't want understood. I mean, that's not saying that we will understand fully every part of the Bible, with a cursory reading of it. But I don't think that. Neither do I think that we should just throw up our hands and say, "Well, how can we possibly understand this?" If it's part of God's Word, He intends us to read it and read it with understanding. So I say that by way of encouragement, that I think it's something that can be understood. All right, so let's dig in. Verse 1 of chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly another beast, a second like a bear, it was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. And the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened, and I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. Okay, so as we read this, so everybody's got this figured out, right? You know exactly what we're talking about, what's going on. All right. Some things that we immediately notice about this vision are different than some of the earlier chapters of the book, even the dream interpretations. So what's one thing you notice about this that is different than maybe some of the other chapters, the other um, dreams that have been interpreted thus far. That's right. Daniel is the one having this one. Before, it was always somebody else. It was King Nebuchadnezzar. It was Belshazzar. It was somebody else having the dreaming or the vision. Now it's Daniel himself. Now, what else do you see that we need to pick up on that's going to help in the interpretation of this? Okay, it certainly seems as though he's seeing what's coming in the future, right? Look at verse 1. In the first year of who? Belshazzar. What does that tell us? All right. And so in chapter 6, um, it, yeah, yeah, chapter 6, we have Darius as a king. And Darius was one from which kingdom? Medes and the Persians. And Belshazzar is from which kingdom? Babylon. So we automatically see this is not it's not chronological. It's not. So the events here, this dream, the dream itself, I'm not talking about the interpretation of it and all of that. I'm talking about the dream itself takes place in the reign of Babylon. And chapter 6, Daniel in the lion's den, takes place in the time of the Medes and the Persians. So it's not in chronological order. And also, we should see that it is apocalyptic. Now, chapter 2, the dream in chapter 2 was apocalyptic as well. Apocalypse means what? See, I knew I was going to get somebody on that. It doesn't mean end times. What does it mean? To reveal, to unveil, to reveal. So, this gives us, if I tell you this is apocalyptic, what literature, then what I'm saying is that God is going to reveal some secret that was previously hidden, that God is about to reveal that. Through Daniel's vision, what we're getting is God revealing a secret that was previously hidden. Now, what's the secret? Well, it's how things are going to turn out, and that's what gets a lot of people excited. When they and wanting to read and study these things is because the secret is what's going to happen in the future. I mean, right? That's what everybody. I mean, people call California psychics, and they pay them a lot of money to find out what's. They go to these, little carnival booths and sit and have their fortune told because they want to know what's going to happen in the future. Well, you can't. The California psychics and the fortune tellers can't tell you your future, but God is going to reveal what's about to happen. So that's exciting there. Now, true or false? Daniel records every detail of his dream, no matter how small. That's false. What does he say? He's telling the main facts. He wrote down, verse 1, he wrote down the dream telling the main facts. So he's saying, I'm giving you basically a summary of what the dream was. All right, now let's take a look at the dream, shall we? Or do you just want to run screaming into the night? No, it's scurry, I'm going to tell you. All right, Phil, put it up there. This is what Daniel saw, a reasonable facsimile thereof. Now, doesn't that just scare you to death? I'll tell you what, if I saw that, I wouldn't want to go back to sleep. I'll tell you. All right, so let's talk about this. So he starts out by saying that he sees a great sea, or the great sea, depending how you want to take that. Verse 2, and what's taking place on the great sea? Possibly a hurricane. Do what? The nations of the earth. Okay, so we got um, the four winds of heaven are stirring up the great sea. So right now we're just kind of trying to lay out the vision, and then we'll talk about what it means. We just want to try to explain what Daniel saw in the vision. So, in this this great sea is in great turmoil from the four winds of heaven. So it's blowing up a storm basically, and then he sees a series of beasts, four beasts, and the first beast looked like what? A lion. Uh-oh, what happened to my? Put it back up there. Put my picture back up there for me. Thank you. Just leave it up there for right now. Okay, so the lion, he sees a lion, but it had wings with like an eagle. Now, what happens to these wings on the lion? They get ripped off. They get torn off, um, and then the lion does what? He stands upright, and he's given the heart of a man. All right. Now, again, we're going to talk about what this means, but right now we're just talking about what he sees. So, sees that lion. Well, not. I mean, this is an artist's rendition of it, but you understand. He sees a lion, wings of an eagle, and then the wings are ripped off, and the lion stands up, uh, upright, and he's given the heart of a man. Now, the second beast is what? It's a bear. We got our bear over there. He looks ferocious, and he has something in his mouth. What does he have in his mouth? 3 ribs in his mouth, and the command is given to him. Basically, eat up. Yeah, eat your fill. Eat your fill. Let's see. In verse 5, arise, devour much flesh. So, yeah, eat your fill. Now, the third beast was a leopard, but it wasn't an ordinary looking leopard, was it? It was a leopard with what? 4 wings, not only 4 wings, but what? 4 heads. 4 heads, 4 wings. So that was it keeps getting weirder, doesn't it? Yeah. He's supposed to be over there in the bottom right corner. Kind of a dark shadow on him, but that's what that's supposed to be. And this leopard is given authority to rule. Verse 6. I looked, there was like a leopard which had on its back 4 wings of a bird, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. In other words, the power to rule, the authority to rule. And then we get to the 4th beast. And the 4th beast doesn't really look like anything, except it's said to be powerful, frightening. It had iron teeth, and it was different than the other beast, which if you look at that thing there, that does look different than any beast. Man, if I saw that thing in my dream, I don't know. I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably wake up screaming, or Lisa would wake me up because I'd be screaming or something. I don't know, but that would be frightening. So it has iron teeth. If you look in verse 7, saw in the night visions a 4th beast, dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong, had huge iron teeth, was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. But it was what? Different. It's different from all the beasts that were before it. So something about this beast is different than the others. And what else is it described as having what? 10 horns. 10 horns. Now that's going to be significant, and there are other places in Scripture where horns and 10 horns are described. So that's going to be significant. And then there's what? One little horn, and this little horn uproots three other horns. Um, and let's see if we are. This little horn is also. It has eyes like a man. So this is no ordinary little horn. This is a very strange little horn. Eyes like a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. So you can take that to be braggadocious, or you can take that to be blasphemous. I think it's probably, the idea is probably both of those things. Um, so, um, so this is, and this little horn uproots three of the other horns. So it's a very strange sight, a very strange picture. But on this beast, you can see in the background there, this huge, scary-looking beast. He has 10 horns come up. He has a little horn. This little horn has eyes and a mouth, and it speaks like a man, but it speaks blasphemy, and it speaks very arrogantly, and it roots out three of the other horns. All right, you got it? Yeah. I'm telling you, it says he was greatly troubled, and I'm thinking, boy, that if there's an understatement in the Bible, that's maybe it right there. I would be greatly troubled as well. Now, that's not all of the vision, though, is it? Because when you get to verse 13, he says, "I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man." Now, if just to read that phrase, "one like the Son of Man," who do you think we're probably going to be talking about? Jesus. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. One like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. Well, that fits other prophecies that speak of Jesus coming in the clouds, doesn't it? He came to the Ancient of Days. Now, the Ancient of Days, you would assume to be a reference to who? God the Father, right? Because if the Son of Man is Jesus, the Ancient of Days we're probably taking to be the Father. And if you look in verse 9, there is a description. "I watched till thrones were put in place. The Ancient of Days was seated, and his garment was white as snow. The hair of his head was like pure wool." So, in other words, he looks like an old. He's portrayed as an old man would be. The idea being, with age comes wisdom. So, a very wise one. The pure white garment representing purity, holiness. So it's a reference to God, it seems clear enough. And they brought, he came to the Ancient of Days. They brought him near before him, and then to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. So the to him there is talking about the Son of Man, Jesus, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away. Okay, so this God's kingdom is the last part of this dream. So the Ancient of Days is seated in like a courtroom scene, and they're bringing thrones in this courtroom, and they're pronouncing judgment. Now, who are they pronouncing judgment on? These beasts, right? That's the idea there, and particularly the fourth beast and the little horn. So the Ancient of Days is seated in this courtroom scene, and there's a multitude before him, and the beast is slain, and the other beasts are stripped of the power, but allowed to remain for a time. And the Son of Man is coming in the clouds in human form, given dominion over the whole earth, and his kingdom endures forever. Um, you get all that? Verse 11 was where he's slain. I watched the when because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain. We're talking about this one with 10 horns here. And its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. That's the judgment that the Ancient of Days is going to bring about on him. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. In other words, they weren't in power anymore. Yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Okay, so that's what he saw. That's not an explanation of what it means. That's an explanation of what he saw. So let's, before we muddy the water anymore, let me pause and see if you have any questions up through verse 14. Well, I've either explained it clearly or else I've confused you to the point that you can no longer even formulate a question. So. Not the Christ. It was the 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 fourth beast. Um, verse 11. I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the little horns was speaking, and I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed. So it's the Ancient of Days. Yeah, right. Yes, because it refers back to beginning of verse 9, the thrones put in place and the Ancient of Days seated, and then going on, his throne was a fiery flame. And I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words, his, I watched till the beast was slain. So that's tied up in that judgment of the Ancient of Days, um, that part of the judgment of the Ancient of Days is the slaying of the beast. Yes. It says its wheels a burning fire. So verse 9, let me read all of 9 again. I watched till thrones were put in place. The Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow. The hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. So the picture would be that the wheels would be on the throne. The throne was a fiery flame. Its wheels, it's referring back to the throne, its wheels, a burning fire. Right, right. Yeah. So it's something in conjunction with the throne. I mean, because it's modifying throne. Now, whether it's literal wheel or whether it's just something that was under it, that yeah, yes, yeah. I mean, I mean, it's kind of the same description there. These, the wheels of Ezekiel is very similar to what's being described here. So, and we really don't get a lot more explanation other than this is just Daniel explaining when he saw God. This is what it looked like. His throne looked like a flame of fire, and then whatever was underneath it that he describes as wheels, because maybe it looked like, a chariot of some sort or something like that. That was fire as well. So basically, everything under, he saw God as portrayed as the Ancient of Days, and underneath him, he's riding on, this chariot of a chariot throne of fire, chariots of fire, kind of deal. So that's a different movie. Yes, ma'am. That's right. Right. So we're I think I have a question on that. I don't want to Do I not? If not, we'll talk about it right now, but I thought I did. Where is it? On the back. Oh yeah. Who are the thrones for? Um, so can we wait till we get there and we'll answer that question right there? Because I don't want to. If I jump ahead too much, I'll get things. But yes, that is a good question, and we will answer that. Okay. Anything else on the vision? Now we get to the fun part of trying to solve the puzzle. All right. Okay. It's not really as complicated as you might first think. All right. Verse 15. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit. Now again, that's probably the understatement of the Bible right there. Within my body, and the vision of my head troubled me. I can believe that. I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those great beasts which are four kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and even forever and ever. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, trampled the residue with its feet. And the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. This is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. Okay, so basically Daniel grabs an angel, not literally, but he gets an explanation from what I'm taking to be an angel. And after the explanation, do you find yourself maybe more confused than before the angel gave the explanation? Okay, so we're going to have to unpackage this a little bit at a time for some meaning. Okay, so Daniel was disturbed by his dream. Now I kind of, tongue in cheek said, well, no wonder he was disturbed by his dream. Look what all he saw. But why was he, more than that, why was he disturbed by it? He didn't know the meaning, that's right. He understood that it spoke of some kind of world chaos, but he didn't understand what it all meant. So if God gave you a message, God gave you a vision or a message of any kind, and he said, hey, the world's going to, be turned upside down. But the way the vision was put forth, you didn't really understand what it all means. What does it all mean, God? And that was kind of where it is. If you've ever, the Lord dealt with you in some way or through circumstances or whatever, and you're like, well, God, I know you're doing something, but what does it all mean? Now, that's kind of where Daniel was in this. So who interprets the dream for Daniel? We kind of assume it's an angel. It was one of those standing by in God's presence. So we're going to say probably an angel because that would seem to make the most sense. And he starts by explaining the four beasts, and he says the four beasts represent what? Not the four beasts represent four kings. So four kings, or or four kingdoms that are going to rise from the earth. Now this is significant. So this is a huge piece of the puzzle, because now these huge scary beasts here, we understand, okay, that's not literally what we're talking about, but they're there to represent something. And what they're there to represent is kingdoms, each beast representing a kingdom. So that's significant in understanding what's going on. I remember when I was a kid, my grandma used to read Revelation, and she'd read about beasts rising up out of the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns. Scared me to death. I'm like, ooh, Grandma, don't read no more. I don't want none of that. But it's apocalyptic. The imagery is supposed to represent something, and in this case, 4 kingdoms. Okay. Have you seen anything else in Daniel that is a weird vision / dream that Daniel interprets that represents kingdoms? Statue. The statue vision of Nebuchadnezzar, right? Now, do you think that maybe it's a good idea to see these kingdoms, which incidentally, how many kingdoms were in the vision of the not counting the last kingdom of Christ, but how many kingdoms in the statue vision? We had 4 that we could name with pretty good certainty, and then you had 1 that was going to rise up out of the 4th one, right? So in this one we have how many? 4. Okay, so let me ask you, do you think it's plausible that the kingdoms of chapter 2 are the same kingdoms perhaps as the kingdoms of chapter 7? Yes. Now this is huge, because this is a huge piece of the puzzle, because if that's true, that means that we can identify these 4 beasts. I mean, that's huge. That's the major part of the vision, the major part of the dream. So, and I would say that's true. And not just based on my own research or study, but most scholars, most conservative scholars that are worth their salt believe that too. I had a professor one time that said, if you come up with an interpretation of the Bible that no one else has ever come up with, chances are you're wrong. So that's kind of pretty good Bible interpretation rule of thumb, So if we believe that, I mean, if we come up with, okay, maybe these 4 in chapter 7 are the same as the 4 in chapter 2, we want to go back and look at what other scholars that are smarter than us and studied more than us, what did they have to say about it? And they're almost universal agreement that those are one and the same. There's always somebody kind of out in the left field that wants to, oh, well, that's China and Russia, and because Russia's the bear and all. I mean, I've heard all kinds of odd things, but most conservative scholars, the vast majority of conservative scholars that have actually studied the Bible believe them to be this one and the same. So that's huge. So that gives us a huge leg up in understanding this. So then we would say that the 2 visions are seen as describing the same series of events. If they're the same kingdoms, then it stands to reason that what's being described is the same series of events. Now that's huge, because we've already gone through chapter 2, and we came away with a fairly good understanding of what that's saying. So if chapter 7 is a retelling of the history of these kingdoms and the events surrounding that, we go into it already with a great deal of understanding, right? That makes sense? Well, I mean, I think it was. I think it's just kind of a retelling of the same thing in a different way, with a few more details added in. We're going to get some details. I mean, we didn't have the 10 horns and the little horn and all of that stuff in chapter 2, but the overall outline of the story is the same. Okay. Now, Phil, put the thing for chapter 2 up there. Let's refresh our memory on what, it's been a little while since we looked at 2. Now, see, I drew you with my own artwork, far better picture than this, right? But you know, in the interest of time and your ability to read it, I put it up there. Now, this is just to kind of remind you of what the vision in chapter 2 was. So Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. He sees this huge statue. It's made of different parts, and the head was made of gold, and the chest was made of silver, and the thighs were bronze or brass. I mean, I guess depending on your interpretation of that. The legs were the legs are iron, and the feet were the mixture of iron and clay. And then he watches, and this rock is hewn out of the mountainside, and it smashes into this statue on its feet, and the statue crumbles and blows away. And then this rock that hit the feet grows into this huge mountain and fills the whole earth. You remember that? Okay. And so, the same deal. Okay, well, each section represents a kingdom. And the head of gold represented Babylon. I'm not going to get you to say it. You can read it as well as I can. Babylon. And then the silver was Persia. And then Greece. And then Rome. And then out of, you know, the fourth one, the feet, the divided thing, was something that was going to be kind of come out of that fourth kingdom, out of Rome, but it was going to be different in some ways. Does it sound familiar of what we just read? Like the same in some ways and yet different. And then the rock that hits the foot, we said, was Jesus Christ, the coming of Jesus Christ, that basically destroys the final kingdom and shatters the statue, and everything blows away. And then the kingdom of Christ grows to fill the whole earth, representing the conquering of Christ. The king. We read that beautiful verse out of Revelation. The kingdoms of the world have become the kingdoms of our God and of His Christ, and He shall reign forever and ever. Oh, that's one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible. It's beautiful. So that's what that describes. Now, we're going to use this approach to try to understand chapter 7. That makes sense? This approach that these two, vision in chapter 2 and the vision in chapter 7, are describing the same kingdoms and roughly the same events. All right, so if that's be the case, now you're free to turn to the illustration on the back page, okay? And Phil, put that up there for us. Let's take a look at this, okay? All right, so on the left-hand side of your paper, or up here, you have the vision of the statue in chapter 2, and then on the right hand, you have the vision of chapter 7 with all the animals, all the beasts. But in the middle, you see they're referring to the same events, okay? So it's not as difficult to understand as it might first see. So now let's see if we can dissect these elements of Daniel's dreams using this approach. So the great sea in tumult, what do you think that represents? Yeah, the nations, the earth, and what's happening to it? Great chaos. There's great chaos in the earth. And out of this chaos arises what? beast, but the beast represent what? Kingdoms. Okay, so what you've got is this great, great sea, they're representing the earth. So there's great tumult, great chaos in the earth, and out of the earth will rise four kingdoms. Okay, now the first beast here is the winged lion. All right, now that coincides with the golden head of the statue, which we said was what? Babylon. All right. Now this is key, and this is again why I pointed out that it's Belshazzar that is reigning when Daniel has this vision. Because if it were Darius the Mede, it would be, we might be inclined to say, well, we need to start with Persia or the Medes and the Persians. But it's the Babylonians that are in power still. So it still seems to coincide with the first kingdom being Babylon. Now, what happens to the wings on this lion? They're ripped off. So which means basically stripped of its power. The idea being Babylon will be stripped of its power, and he stands upright like a man would stand upright, and he's given the heart of a man. So this seems to be a reference to the humbling of Nebuchadnezzar that we read about, from his other vision that he had, where afterwards he refuses to give glory to God, so he crawls around on the ground and eats grass and thinks he's a cow or whatever, and finally he repents and he's restored to his kingdom. But there's a humbling there. It seems as though that's kind of what's in reference there. The second beast is what? It's the bear, which coincides with the silver chest of the statue, which we said were the Medes and the Persians. Now this bear is interesting because he has three ribs in his mouth, and your first thing you're going to ask me is, what does the three ribs represent? And I'm going to have to say, I don't know. There's a couple of different thoughts. Some think that it represents the three territories that the Medes and the Persians conquered. But as soon as you say that, then there becomes a debate on, well, which three territories are you talking about? Some say, well, Babylon, Syria, Assyria. Some people say Egypt should be thrown in there. I mean, there's different ideas. Or other scholars simply say, well, it's just a representation to show the fierceness and ferocious conquering of this, that the bear has devoured its prey and all that's left is three ribs. And so the Medes and the Persians would conquer, and there'd be very little left afterwards. So, take it how you will. I don't have a definitive answer on what specifically the three ribs represent. If it is three territories, I don't know what the territories are, or it could be just that it represents, that's all that's left after it gets done. The third beast is the four-headed leopard, which coincides with the bronze thighs of the statue. And this, we said, was what? Greece. Now this four-headed leopard, these four heads, any idea what that might represent? Right. So generally when you see heads, crowns, anything like that, you're talking about kings or kingdoms. So, interesting little story about in the history of Greece. After the death of Alexander the Great, his kingdom was divided into four kingdoms, four smaller territories. So most scholars think that this is in fact a reference to Greece, and the four heads are referring to the four kingdoms that his kingdom was divided into at the time of his death. Now the fourth beast is a little different, a little more difficult to identify. But we were able to identify the fourth the fourth section, the fourth kingdom on the statue. So if you look at the fierce beast, he seems to coincide with the fourth kingdom on the statue, which is the legs of iron, and we said that represented what? Rome. Okay, now below, and that seems clear enough, and most scholars agree on that. So below that, on the statue, you have the feet, and the feet are made up of the toes, and there are how many toes? 10, and there's something different about that. It's iron, but it's iron mixed with clay. So it seems as though there's a part of the fourth kingdom in it, and it's like that, but it's different in some ways. And we talked a little bit about that. We said, well, this is something. This fourth kingdom is going to be like the kingdom of Rome, but it's going to be different in some ways. Maybe even have some aspects of Rome to it, but be different in some ways. Okay, well, with this ferocious beast in chapter 7, we don't have feet with toes. What do we have? Horns. And there are how many horns? 10. So it's matching up again for us. And these are also said to be 10 kings. Look, so let's get to where that describes that. Verse 24, the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom. So that's pretty clear that we're talking, the horns represent kings or kingdoms. Another shall arise after them, and he shall be different from the first one. It's still talking about horns, and shall subdue 3 kings. So the horns represent kings. So if we take and put it together, that in fact Rome is the fourth kingdom, then what you have in the feet of iron mixed with clay and the 10 horns are one and the same. And that is that you're going to have 10 kingdoms to rise out of the old Roman Empire that will be somehow like it, but different. Okay? Now that's about as much as we can say with certainty, because when we start pushing it beyond that, then we get into speculation. Okay, well, who are the kings? Well, what is it? And it ranges everything from the European Union, the EU, whatever that is, to the Pope and the Catholic Church. I mean, there are all kinds of ideas, and I mean, we could sit and talk about those, but it's all purely speculation. What we can say with some certainty about the vision is that it speaks of these 4 kingdoms culminating in Rome, and then this fourth and final kingdom that's going to arise and be like Rome, but somehow different, somehow more sinister, somehow more spiritual, but in an evil way. Somehow, because out of this, the little horn comes to power. And the little horn, now this little horn with eyes and a big mouth that speaks braggadly and blasphemously. Now, just off the top of your head, who are we talking about here? The Antichrist. Again, now we could speculate all day long who that is, and there have been, for 2,000 years, people have been speculating about that. But what we can say with certainty is that this little horn is supposed to represent the Antichrist that will come out of this kingdom that's going to be like the old Roman Empire. Maybe even, in some ways a part of the old Roman Empire, but different. Not just a resurrection of the old Roman Empire, but revived in a new and more sinister and more evil way, even than the old Roman Empire. That makes sense? All right, then we get the coming of the Son of Man, which ties in very well to the stone in the statue that hits the feet of the stone from the rock that hits the feet of the statue and shatters it. So this rock hewn from the mountain that destroys the statues is this description of the judgment of the Antichrist and the establishment of Christ's eternal kingdom, which is the same thing that we have in chapter 7. Coming of the Son of Man, the Ancient of Days, the judgment, and the beast is destroyed. So the two visions are actually, they're one and the same. They describe the same event, just with a little bit different imagery and a little bit different details. So seeing it in this way, does this now not seem so scary and uninterpretable? Does it now make more sense to you? All right. Let me pause right there and see if you have questions on this. I'm running out of time, so we're gonna have to wrap it up pretty quickly. Okay. So this little horn, there's something that this little horn is doing besides just speaking blasphemies. He's doing something, and this would especially be concerning for Daniel. What do you think it would be? What is it? Yeah, well, he says the saints is what it says. Let's find where that is. 25. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High. He shall persecute the saints of the Most High. And I've got a footnote on 25 that says literally wear out. He will wear, that's a good description. He will wear out the saints of the Most High. So now, you said persecution of the Jews. It could be that, or it could also, now we're talking about end time stuff now. What it could also be what? Christians, which could actually be one and the same, because what does Paul heavily allude to that's going to happen to the Jews prior to the end? Yeah, the idea is that the blinders will be lifted and they will see Christ as the Messiah and they will come to Christ in great numbers. So perhaps to say the persecution of the Jews and the persecution of the Christians would be one and the same, but I think for sure we can say persecution of the church here. What's meant by the statement, the little horn will seek to change times and the law? Well, something like that, but to the Jews, times and law had to do with what? How they worship God, right? So if they want to change times and law, in other words, they want to change your ability to worship God. So this little horn, this Antichrist, this one that will arise at the end, is going to attempt to deny religious liberty and impede worship of God. Sounds like a page clipped out of the newspaper, doesn't it? Deny religious liberty and impede worship of God. Yes, I mean, other scriptures would point to that as well. He sets himself up to be God. So there's a couple of phrases in there that we need to kind of clear up. Saints are given into his hand. This would be what? Persecution. Persecution of the church. How about the phrase time, times, and a half a time? Okay, 3.5 years. We got that one, don't we? So time is 1, times 2 more, and a half a time would equal 3.5. That's the pretty general interpretation by just pretty much everybody on that. So it can mean a couple of things. So 3.5 is half of what? 7. 7 being the number that represents completeness. So if 7 being the complete number of years or time, then if we're talking 3.5, half of that then you're talking perhaps in symbolic terms of a short time, a short season. Or you can take it more literally and say it's 3.5 years. If these times, and half a time is representing years, literal years, then you're dealing with a period of 3.5 years. So either symbolically representing a short season of time, or literally 3.5 years. Now we get to the question that Elizabeth asked earlier. Who are the thrones for in verse 9? And I'm going to let y'all see if you can answer me. Let's look at verse 9 again. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was like white as snow. So who are the thrones that are seated? It's not his throne, by the way, because his throne was a fiery flame. There are other thrones put in place. Who is it for? Let me draw. I told you that I would, when applicable, we would use scripture, other scriptures that related. So we're going to do that here. Look at chapter 20 of Revelation, verse 4. Chapter 20, verse 4. I want to read that to you. I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. So who are the thrones for? The redeemed. The redeemed. Which means what? Who's going to be sitting on them? We are. You get to judge this ugly thing, and for now, in conjunction with the, as the redeemed of the Son of Man, you get to pronounce judgment on this ugly creature here, and the little horn too. So that'll be a good day. What the river of fire from the throne represents? What do you think? Fire generally represents judgment, so that's good. Man, we're running way late. These scriptures. I just want to read. I just want to read Revelation 13 to you. I'll let you read the others, okay? But let's read 13 together. Revelation 13. I want you to look at what John sees in Revelation as what Daniel sees in chapter 7, and tell me if you don't think they're seeing the same thing, all right? Verse 1, then I stood on the sand of the sea. There it is again. And I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him power, his throne, and great authority. I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. See, we get more details here with John, but it seems to be the same thing. All the world marveled and followed the beast, and they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. How much is 42 months? 3.5 years. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints, there's that idea again, to overcome them, and the authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life. Of the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has ear, let him hear. In other words, John's saying, look, if you can understand it, you need to understand it. It's not meant to be hidden from you. It's meant to be understood. So I'll let you be the judge, but to me it seems pretty clear that what John sees and what Daniel sees in chapter 7 and what Nebuchadnezzar saw in chapter 2 is all describing the same event. It's just different details and different imagery. So, questions, comments? Tar and feather. Okay. And then seeing the turmoil on the earth with the tranquility in heaven, encouragement. God is in control, you know. No matter how bad things get on earth, things are still good in heaven. And I think in a day like today, we really need to hear that and know that. So what do you think is the main purpose of the vision? To provide, and you circle the best answer, to provide detailed information so scholars can chart out the time of Christ's return? What do you think? No? Yes? To let God's people know not to worry because they'll be raptured before anything bad happens? To scare people into believing into Jesus? How about to make preachers rich selling Left Behind books? Or to encourage God's people to remain faithful in spite of persecution because God is in control of history? I would say E is it. All right, well, I kept you over and I'm sorry about that, but man, it's interesting stuff, is it not? All right, chapter 8 next week. Let's close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word and how you do speak to us. Thank you for giving us understanding and revealing your truth to us, God. Lord, I pray that you would make us salt and light as we go from here into the world. We pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.